All right, well, welcome everybody. This is the last session of Aftercare Industry Month, which is generously presented by Thoroughbred Education and Research Foundation. We're very grateful to their support. This is an effort by the Retired Racehorse Project that kind of evolved out of the Aftercare Summit that we used to hold at the Thoroughbred Makeover. So if you ever attended it in person, you know it was classroom sessions upstairs, and there's so much else going on during Makeover Week that it is a little difficult to actually bring everybody together, even though that is the largest national gathering of like-minded folks in aftercare. So we have found that this virtual format seems to be serving us much, much better. So you will be receiving a survey via email, probably tomorrow or Thursday at the latest, with the recording of this session. So if you attended any part of Aftercare Industry Month, and if you're watching this on demand later, please fill out that survey. That'll be really helpful to us to know how to structure this for next year. So the reason that the Retired Racehorse Project takes on Aftercare Industry Month is because we are uniquely placed as the only organization in Thoroughbred Aftercare that gets to work with all facets of the industry. So that includes not just the nonprofit adoption organizations, but also the so-called quote-unquote for-profit resellers, listing agents, track-based programs, advocacy programs. So we're a really wide-reaching organization and that we get to work with all of these. So presenting Aftercare Industry Month as a gathering place, as an educational format for everybody, was kind of a no-brainer for us. So we're very pleased to have everybody join us. A couple of housekeeping things. We went over this a little bit earlier. Because this is working as a meeting, everybody's going to stay, other than our panelists and myself, will stay on mute and with their cameras off. And then when it's time for group discussion later on, everybody can turn those cameras back on and we'll have some conversation. I am Kristen Kovach-Bentley. I'm the communications manager for the Retired Racehorse Project. I have been with the RRP now for 5 years, so I've seen several different evolutions of Aftercare Industry Month, but we're really excited to present this tonight. This is the difficult to place horse. I think this will be a really cool session. Certainly something that's kind of in the forefront of aftercare discussion as we go forward. So I think we're in for some good discussion tonight. So representing both sides, for-profit and nonprofit, we have with us Bev Strauss from MidAtlantic Horse Rescue and Jen Ruberto from Wire to Wire Thoroughbreds. I'm going to have these ladies introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about their background and how their programs work. So Bev, we'll go ahead and start with you.
All right. I'm Bev Strauss. I'm the co-founder and executive director of MidAtlantic Horse Rescue. We've been going for, I think, 22 years now. We only do thoroughbreds. We started buying horses at New Holland auction and kill buyers and whatever. We started with 3 horses in a 3-acre field and have, pulled ourselves up by our bootstraps. So now we've got, our main farm is 160 acres. We've got about 50 horses there. And then we've got 3 satellite farms with about 100 horses in our program all the time. So it's really been a labor of love. We've been careful about our growth. And we've been thrilled that the thoroughbred industry now has the RRP to market the thoroughbred, and the industry is behind aftercare. We've got TAA. We've always had Thoroughbred Charities of America. They've been supportive from the beginning. But as far as, really focusing on aftercare, that really has just been the last maybe 10 years. How old is RRP now, Kristen, do you think? Do you know?
I know we had our 10-year anniversary of the first Pimlico makeover last year.
Right.
As an organization, it was around a little bit before that. So
yeah. So, we're thrilled that the industry has gotten behind aftercare because we all know how excellent these horses are. I think, I know I grew up riding thoroughbreds. There weren't such things as warm bloods. I always was involved in racing and loved it. And as I realized what was happening to these horses after their racing careers, I was very naive initially. I thought, oh, all these horses are going to go out and be hunters, jumpers, pony club horses, whatever. And then I think we realized that wasn't happening. So anyway, so that's the long and the short of it. We've got, again, about 100 horses in our program at any given time. We place about 110 horses a year. Everything from pasture pets to people who want to go to the Olympics. We've placed close to 3,000 horses since we started. So we've certainly seen difficult to place horses.
that's kind of like the range of thoroughbred aftercare, isn't it? Past your pets to the Olympics. So good, representing all ends. Thanks, Bev. Jen, why don't you introduce yourself?
Okay. Hi, I'm Jen Ruberto. I am the owner of Wire to Wire Thoroughbreds. I have been in the racing industry with my husband and his family for the last 22 years. And prior to that, I did resales and act as a buyer and seller agent for many years prior to that. And I mostly just buy them myself. I seek out the best prospects that I can find, do my own field testing as far as assessing them, and then bring them home. I'm kind of a one-woman show. I'm lucky if I get a holder to take pictures. um, and I usually have between 6 and 8 horses at a time. We do have 130 acres here, but the majority of the farm is set up for our race horses. So I last year did, including my horses, and helped network some horses for some other people. I did 65 horses, which is the most that I've done on my own in a year. I do help network for other trainers, but I don't do commission sales anymore because I want to keep my amateur status for my dressage horse, and I'm not a pro rider. I've been in racing since before I met my husband 20 years ago, and worked through high school down at Laurel in Maryland. And then I've done my share of rescues as well. Tried to stay behind the scenes because I didn't really want that publicity. I'm kind of a private person as far as that's concerned. But I do pick up some here and there that really need upgrades. And I've had a few in the last month or two that really needed some help. So they came here and got their time and then got placed with different people. Obviously, that's not the best business model to go through, but sometimes you have to follow your heart, and help the ones that need the help. But that's it in a nutshell. We race. We have anywhere between 30 and 35 horses on our farm at one time, and that's racing stock and breeding stock as well, and then my sale horses. And my background is mostly hunter jumper, but then I switched over to doing dressage with my own horse. So it's always been thoroughbreds ever since I could say the word horse. I mean, even the lesson horses that I rode. So that's sort of what I do here. I enjoy it. I love making the matches, even the ones that cost me money and don't make any profit. They are still, to me, they're so worthwhile. And they're a little harder and they're a little bit more stressful, as Bev can probably tell you over and over again, but it does make you feel good when you find the hard ones a good place to go. So.
Well, and that's why you are both our panelists this evening, because I knew you both have, great experience and plenty to share on this particular topic. So thank you both for joining us. So let's jump into it and try to define the difficult to place horse. And we were chatting a little bit, before we started this meeting, that can really range. So typically when you're talking about a horse that's difficult to place, what kind of horses are you guys working with for that? Bev, we'll start with you.
I think the hardest to place horse is a horse that's tough to ride, but isn't sound enough for a good rider, or maybe doesn't have the talent for a good rider. I remember years and years ago when I was eventing, I was in Pony Club, and I read an article in USCTA News. Denny Emerson said, "Oh, the most important thing about a horse is temperament." And I was like, "Oh, no, 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 no," because I love them hot and crazy and whatever. But I've come to find that really is true. I mean, we can have a horse with a stellar temperament, but isn't sound enough for much. And they're much easier to place, in my opinion, than a horse that's tough to ride and isn't sound. I think that's sort of a double whammy, because there are people that can ride these tough horses, but if they're not able to compete at the level, or, at least perform at the level that person wants, that's a really hard sell.
And when you say unsound, you're meaning, limited from like going 5-star eventing.
Right. Or even limited from jumping a course in the ring. I mean, we can get a horse that might only be sound to walk, maybe trot on the trails. If he's got a good temperament, I can find him a home. But if we have that fire breathing dragon who wants to go, 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 maybe hasn't had the best history, yet he can't physically keep up with his mindset. I think that really is a tough call.
Yeah, tough. Okay. And Jen, how about you in your experience?
As someone who resells, and there's tons of people out here that, out in the US that do it and all over, when you come across something that you weren't expecting on a pre-purchase, say you have one that's appears to be sound and seems to be riding well, and you've got a event rider that wants to take it through preliminary, and you do x-rays, and there's a bunch of chips, or there's a bunch of arthritis, or there's kissing spine. Those are the ones people run away screaming, no, I can't possibly take that horse because it'll never stay sound, even though it's currently sound. So then you're looking for a home that will do the maintenance over time, because I'm seeing a lot of people in their in-seek ads that don't want any maintenance. And to me, maintenance can be putting shoes on a horse, or, getting their teeth done. So those types. And then actually the hard to sell ones, even when they're sound and have a good mind, are the older horses, the smaller horses. Maybe they're sound and have a big ankle on them, but they're sound. As far as the resale is concerned, those are the tough ones that I find. And I've had a few of them that gave me some surprises last year that took a while. But it's more like marketability and what the market's looking for. And if you can't find the right person that's going to take a horse that might be sound but has some little issues that are going to need to be maintained over time, those are the ones that are harder for me. So
I think, Jen, the one thing you brought up is kissing spines, and that is sort of the buzzword in pre-purchases the last few years. And that wasn't ever a factor, yet you can't tell me that horses never had this issue.
Right.
But I think now, people are x-raying backs, and if it's not perfect, even though the x-rays are hard to get perfect, people run away from that very quickly.
Right. Yep.
So let's flip that question the other way then. Bev, you kind of alluded to this before, but like, what's the easiest horse to place?
A 16 two-hand gray gelding.
Those big sexy dapples, yeah.
Yeah. No, I mean, to me, temperament is so important these days. I think, Jen, we got a really nice older war horse from you with huge ankles. It ended up, he was awesome, and we found him a great home. I think as a rescue, I think we have an easier time placing horses with osselets or old injuries. We do stand behind them always. I know a lot of resellers do stand behind them, but they're not always able to. So I think being a TAA accredited organization, we're sort of obligated, and we want to always take our horses back. We just got a horse back that we placed 12 years ago, and he's like 20 something now, and he doesn't want to do anything but just eat and sleep. So I think we have an easier time placing a horse that might have some issues, that, they're sound, but they've got big ankles or whatever. I think that makes it harder if you're a reseller, for sure.
Jen, what's your easiest type to place?
The horse that everybody wants. It's that 3 to 6 year old large gelding with a lot of white on it.
Yeah.
I bought an 8-year-old 17-hand gray gelding that I thought, and he had like 60 or 70 starts, and I paid a lot of money for him. And I thought, well, here we go. He's gray. Somebody's going to like him. And he sold in an hour, so it's the I look for the temperament, the correct movement. I look for, I like to listen to where their feet hit the ground. So, I'm looking for the horse that the amateur can ride, that, that might have the flashy movement, but they're not something that a professional has to have, because you have more amateurs out there than you have pros. So if the mind is there and they have the good movement, they're going to sell. It's just in that weird 15-1 to 15-3 range that people are strange about. So the bigger, younger geldings, 100%.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, do mares seem to be a little more difficult? Like, I know, just speaking for as a horse person, like you have your diehard mare people, and then you have not mare people. So do you have a harder time with mares?
Well, it depends on the mare, obviously, but every time that I have 5 or 6 nice geldings, everybody wants a mare. So, but I've had some really nice mares this past year. And again, the ones that I sat on for the longest time were like 15.2 to 15.3. The bigger ones over 16 hands, they were selling anyway. It's just about movement and temperament has been the big thing for me. And obviously you don't want to pick up, as a reseller, you don't want to pick something that's really crooked, or that moves a little funky that people are going to pick apart. But no, I haven't had too much trouble selling the mares, as long as they're in that range that people are buying. The market, you really have to pay attention to it.
I think there are probably more not mare people than there are otherwise, but it's the same. Now, of course, if you get a little mare like 15, 1, they're easy to place because of the polo connection. Right. Yeah. But I think 15.2, 15.3, it really depends on the people. And we've just gotten a couple of mares back. We don't get many returns. We've gotten a couple of mares back that just haven't been the perfect match, or maybe the personality of the rider to the horse just over the course of a year or two has changed, and the mares have come back a little bit spicy, or I don't want to say spicy, but they've needed some readjustment. And I think they're hard for us when we get a return. We don't get many, as I said, but when we get a return, people always are suspect, like, well, why did that one come back? And often there's a valid reason, but often there isn't. Often it's just financial or whatever. But I still think when people hear it's a return, they're more suspect about that horse.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, because there must be a reason. So
right.
Right. So how do you market your difficult to place horses to get them into good homes? I'll start with Bev.
Usually our difficult to place horses are a lot less expensive. We've got our pasture pet program, which is for horses that are not sound for riding. We place them for $1, and then the horse cannot be rehomed. It's companion only, and we deliver it, and then we pick it up if it's ever not needed. And that's been a pretty successful program for us. In fact, I got a call today. Somebody is going to take a pasture pet tomorrow. So that's worked out well. The horses that we have that are unsound, or not unsound, but maybe not clean-legged or tougher, we'll sometimes run specials. But often, when people call me looking for a horse, if I think that a horse that might be tough might work for them, then I'll say, okay, well, we'll do this horse and we'll reduce its fee drastically just to get it in the right place. We don't necessarily advertise that, because if I put, this certain horse up for, $500, I'm going to get a lot of people who are just looking at the price point, where we want somebody who's going to match the horse. So, as people reach out to me, if I've got a horse that has been tough to place and I think this person might suit them, then I'll say, well, why don't you look at this one, and, we can do something with the fee. Yeah,
that makes sense, that people would just be like, oh, this one's cheap, but that's not necessarily going to be the right home for that horse, and the right understanding, of what that horse might need. So yeah, I like that, you're emphasizing the matchmaking side. Jen, how about you? How do you market those horses that are challenging for various reasons?
I try to highlight their personalities. I try to highlight a lot of the ones that I've had that have been really tough have had unbelievable temperaments. I show them doing stuff on the ground, like competitive trail in hand, or I show them, leading in off of the RTV, or I show them with my kids, or, and I try to get really nice pictures that shows their personality, shows their eye, and so that they appeal to the people that are looking for something that might just trail ride, or be a buddy to one of their other horses. They'll fall in love with them, because in marketing, they call it impulse buys. If you can get that pretty picture up and show them this video of this horse being, you know, a really great companion, a lot of people go, I have to have it, you know, and then I go through a process of, I go through a process of checking backgrounds because I almost got duped on one that would have been a really bad place. And I kind of consider myself pretty good at the sleuthing. But I do have a couple of repeat buyers that I've placed horses with that aren't ideal for everybody. And they've been able to put them into different programs, whether it was like a walk trot program or just with a family that wanted to give pony rides to their kids because of their temperament being that good. I had a 3-year-old this past year. He flexed perfect. He was such a nice horse, very easy to deal with. X-ray showed a ton of chips, totally duped me. We were all shocked, and I actually sent him to this friend of mine. I always tell her, you know, if you can get a little bit for him, that's great. You need to send him with my contract, because even if they don't work out for somebody, they might work out for somebody else. So I always offer up, even if I can't take them back financially myself, I will always help place them again, because I
Right.
don't want to have to rescue them later on. So building relationships with former owners, you know, doing a lot of background checks, and then putting up those really nice pictures and doing other things with them that people could potentially have a lot of fun with. Like I said, the in-hand trail stuff, I got a horse that's phenomenal first time. And there are people that that's all they do. You know, they just want to do the in stuff, or maybe they want to drive because they can't ride. So I kind of try to play off whatever is that horse's greatest asset, you know, and then kind of market them that way. And some of them take months, you know, and it's my responsibility to find the right place for them. Um, you know, I don't want to have to go in and rescue them one day. So that's the way I do it.
There's one thing that we were talking about at our last TAA Zoom meeting. Horse agility is a thing where they, I guess it's like in-hand competitive trail, but we're actually going to look into that for some of our horses that, you know, aren't going to be sound for riding. You know, apparently it's a pretty big thing that people are getting excited about. So that might be a good avenue for these harder to place horses. I think one thing that we should probably talk about, and maybe I'm speaking out of turn, is euthanasia. Because, you know, we've had some horses that I consider dangerous, and it isn't worth hurting the horse or hurting somebody else. You know, we give horses like that every chance we can, but in the end, you know, even if you have somebody who swears they're going to take that horse and turn it around, if it's a dangerous horse, the horse is going to end up in a bad place. And I think that is certainly a real conversation that we need to have, you know, just as horse owners. And, you know, I think Tom Mansman's dad had said, aren't we lucky? Aren't we blessed to be able to give these horses a peaceful ending if they need it? So, you know, it's not an easy thing. We have a horse right now that I haven't put down yet, but I will never adopt him out. There was a rescue. She's not accredited, but she's a pretty popular rescue, and she wanted him and was going to do the makeover with him. And I told her that I didn't trust him for riding. And she said, oh, well, you know, basically I'm the horse whisperer and I'm going to, you know, I want to try it. And she said, if it doesn't work, oh, he can live his days out here. Well, about 8 weeks later, we got a call. We're bringing him back because he flipped over, which, you know, it's a horse that he just isn't reliable. And I never trusted him enough for us to get on him. You know, we did a lot of in-hand work, but there was always just this at the back of my mind, don't know. So he's one that we'll never adopt out, and we probably will euthanize him at some point. You know, there's certain days he's in your pocket and friendly, and other days you can't get near him. You'd think he'd never seen a person before. So, you know, that's sort of something that I think that we always have to discuss.
Yeah, we were going to touch on it later, but I'm happy to touch on it right now. And I'm actually going to screen share. I dropped this link in the chat as well for anybody who is not familiar with the AAP euthanasia guidelines, sort of the TLDR for right now. By the AAP guidelines, a horse should not have to endure the following: continuous or unmanageable pain from a condition that is chronic and incurable, a medical condition or surgical procedure that has a poor prognosis for a good quality of life, continuous medication and or box stall confinement for the relief of pain for the rest of its life, or an unmanageable medical or behavioral condition that renders it a hazard to itself or its handlers. So definitely that horse sounds like it's in that latter category
Yes,
for sure.
sure
So,
is. Yep.
yeah. So, you know, it's one of those things, right? Like culturally, as an equestrian industry, you know, we have a hard time sometimes thinking about when that's appropriate. You know, I think the AEP spells it out pretty clearly that like here is a standard that we can all follow as an industry to know like when that is appropriate and okay. I know like as a private owner, I've had this discussion with friends, like nobody should be bankrupting themselves, you know, for managing these unmanageable conditions. So yeah, I think it's great that the AEP has provided this for us. So the link is in the chat if anybody wants to open that up on their own computer or at home and save that for the future. But yeah, good. Thank you for bringing that up, Bev, because I did want to touch on that. I have too many screens open, so I was going to stop the screen share. So, and Jen, have you been in that situation too, where there's just some horses that are just not placed?
Yeah. The last one that I was talking about was full of chips. He was comfortable, but I didn't know if he would be comfortable for the rest of his life and if somebody would want to maintain that because there's only 3. And promised him that if I didn't find the right place, that was going to be my choice. And I've always had that on the table as an option for if I have one that I know that is not, you know, maybe it's 6 years old and it's crippled now and somebody else doesn't want to deal with it. I don't want to put that on someone else. I just didn't touch on it yet because I knew we were going to talk about it later, but now that it's brought up, yes, absolutely. It should be an option. And I feel like it's really sad when people don't keep that in the back of their head as an option when they have a horse that truly is in pain all the time and they're afraid to do it or there's backlash about it. But as a responsible owner, I mean, it's something that you have to do at some point, you know, and it definitely is always in the back of my mind if I have one that seems like it's going to be hard to place, because I'd rather do that than have them starve in somebody's field.
Right,
So,
right.
Yeah. Yeah. It's hard to have to come to that decision. And, you know, it's hard to predict the future, right? Like maybe you do find the perfect home that's happy to keep that horse,
Yep.
you know, medicated and, you know, on limited turnout or, you know, turnout that suits his condition, but those homes are so rare.
Right.
So, yeah.
And that horse, when I sent him off to where he went, I told her that if it came down to it, that I would help her with those costs. That it would not upset me if she made that decision for him, because I, like I said, I don't want to see him in a situation where people aren't keeping him comfortable. He can't be comfortable anymore, and now he's in a field and he's losing weight. And,
Right,
you know,
right.
so
Yeah.
It's funny, we've got 2 horses that have really severe injuries, and when they came into us, you know, we knew they'd be pasture pets, and our vets basically said, oh, you know, you're not going to get 2 months out of this or whatever. Well, surprise, surprise, they've sort of come sound. I mean, they're only going to be pasture pets, but I'm not going to place them as pasture pets because I know the time is going to come when we're going to have to euthanize them. But right now they're happy and out 24/7 on no meds, and it surprised all of us. But, you know, again, the writing's on the wall at some point.
sure.
Yeah. And it's one of those things, right? Like you always ideally want to, you know, I've been in this situation fairly recently where, you know, the saying is better a day too early than a minute too late. But when you're at that day, it's still very hard to make that decision, you know, where you're like, it's still okay today, but it may be very not okay tomorrow, you know, and it's very hard. It's a decision that looks very black and white on paper. And then you get in the moment, you're like, this is a very gray area. And I feel it's hard, you know, it's just hard as a horse person. So, but yeah.
I think we find it hard, you know, I don't own these horses, the rescue does, so they're not, I mean, I deal with them all the time, but it's not like the ones I have in my barn, but it still is a really tough call. But you know when it's time, you know, it's just, you know. Or
at least the logical part of you does.
You have
to still convince the hard part of you.
We don't cry.
Yes. Yeah, so good discussion. You know, if anyone else has any comments or questions about euthanasia, we can circle back around to that again. So one question I did want to touch on, there's been, a lot of Facebook posts going viral recently about from the sellers or, adopting organizations perspective that like buyers really seem to want like the unicorn, right? With like no maintenance, clean PPE, like perfect x-rays, and anything that needs maintenance. And Jen, you mentioned maintenance could be as simple as a set of shoes. Any maintenance, any old injuries are an instant red flag for buyers because they don't want to have to deal with it. They don't want to have to pay for it. Obviously, I am sure we all have very strong feelings on that, and we could talk for hours about how unrealistic of a goal that is. But I think that is a symptom of all of us needing to do more to educate buyers on like what is truly a red flag and what is probably going to be okay, if you approach it from this, mindset or that standpoint, if you're working with a vet. So what can we all do to educate the like buying community and adopting community about like what they really need to know or what kind of horse they really need, what kind of maintenance might be appropriate? And that's kind of a big question, right? Like, how do we solve all the problems of the world? And this is the meeting. But realistically, like it's an educational, thing that a push that we need to make. So how do we do that?
I think, that, go ahead, Jen.
I was just going to say that's a hard one because, with a nonprofit like Bev, she's got this audience that was probably listen when if you guys put that information out. Me as a sole owner of a resale, a lot of people are following what their trainers say or what they think they know, and they don't want to be educated. So like as a reseller, I tend to run away from those kind of buyers because I don't want my horses to end up in a place where they don't get what they actually need. But for education purposes, I mean, what you guys are doing now, putting out the webinars and putting out the, the classes and everything I don't know what the right answer is. I do try to talk to buyers the best as I can and ask them what their goals are, what they really need, where their skill set is, and try to tell them, hey, this horse has had 80 starts on those ankles, and I don't think anything you do is going to make them sore. You don't have a crystal ball, but as a reseller, it's a little bit different because like I don't have the same type of audience, as I would if I was a nonprofit on a bigger scale. So I'm definitely interested to hear what you have to say, Bev.
I think, Jen, one of your strong suits is you've got the experience with racing, with horses. So, we try to do the same thing. In our experience, this probably isn't going to bother the horse. We have sometimes people that are like, oh, it has to be perfect. It has to be this, that, and the other. And I say, well, you know what? It might colic tomorrow and die. I hate to say that, but you can have the perfect horse and it's going to find some way to get hurt or get sick or whatever. So, you try to educate people to let them know what horses can or can't live with. And obviously every case isn't the same. And we're always able to say, well, if it doesn't work out, we'll take the horse back, which is hard if you're a reseller like you are, Jen. It's going to be hard for us as well, without a doubt. I think maybe I'll be retired by the time things like that happen. I don't know. But I think if you can just educate people, and I often refer people to the RRP library or, the Blood Horse often has some good articles. It's funny though, because the things that we consider sound in the racing world, and they are sound, people in the riding horse world run away from. If you go to a racehorse trainer and say, is this horse sound? Oh yeah. And then, yet it's probably never going to pass a PPE. So I think people have to realize, these horses are athletes. They've been doing, and as Jen said, if this horse has 80 starts and it's been sound, it's going to continue to be sound. I mean, you might have to do maintenance down the road, but that's going to be with any horse. These warm bloods that are coming over need all the hock injections and whatever. They might be perfect today, but it doesn't mean they're going to be perfect down the road.
Yeah, that's just kind of a fact of life for an athlete that is aging. So
anybody that's aging, hello.
Right? Yeah, if you jogged me, I wouldn't look very good either. So one hard thing with education is that like you can't make people be educated who don't want to be educated, right? Like if
That's right.
they are not in the mindset where they want to learn that, you can lead that horse to water, but you cannot make it drink. You know, to our end at the RRP, we do put out like webinar content. We have numerous long form content articles on our website, you know, that we're happy to curate into a collection for resellers and adoption groups who, you know, may want to use some of these articles to say like, hey, just gonna put it out here, you know, that like, these are injuries you can expect to find on the track, and this is how it may or may not affect this horse, you know, and as you said, Bev, we don't have a crystal ball. We don't know, you know, like those horses could be sore tomorrow, but yeah, I mean, the best we can do, I think, at this stage is just keep putting the information out there and hope that the right people will continue to read it. But that is kind of an ongoing struggle with creating educational content is, you know, if nobody wants to be educated, they aren't going to read it. So
Kristen, the only thing I was going to say that I've done that has helped it, well, not the only thing, but one of the things I try to do is to do updates on the horses that I've sold publicly. So if I have one that had an old oslet and, you know, so-and-so passed up on, you know, these people passed up on this horse and look at it now, it's eventing at training and killing it. Or even I've done updates on trot videos from when the horse first got to me and it was body sore to three to 4 weeks out of turnout. And people were like, wow, that's a huge difference. You know, the horse is moving so much better. I'm like, some of them just need a little time. There's not really anything wrong with them. They might need some body work, you know, so I think that's come across the best that I can do with the following that I have. And to explain, you know, I've had people that really give me a lot of compliments on my personal horse. I'm like, well, he's a head shaker and he's got string halt and he's got bad hocks. And I inject his hocks every year so that he's comfortable. And he's not lame by any means, but they need the maintenance. But look, everybody loves the horse, you know, and he's done all these things. So I try to do before and afters whenever I can get updates from buyers so that I can show, you know, this horse was a little crooked, but look at him. He's, you know, killing it in the hunters, you know, and then some people will come back and say, like former buyers will say, well, I don't mind an ankle. I don't mind an old bow as long as it's set, you know, that's like on that level, that's the best that I can do to educate people with my platform. Since I'm not an organization that has that widespread of audience, but I do the best I can. So.
Well, and I think, you know, it's one of those like more voices in the conversation, you know, like you may not think you have a giant following, but if it's another voice adding to that conversation, I think that's really powerful. And I think a testimonial is extremely powerful, you know, to say like, here is an example of a horse that had, you know, X, Y, and Z wrong with it, but it's going on and doing these things. So
I think another thing too is, you know, you get a horse and it's a total giraffe, and we've actually put up videos, and, you know, we're not going to go ahead and put them in a lunging rig or whatever to set their head. And, you know, like right now I've got a filly who she won't pass reflections, but she's sound. She wants to be a giraffe and stick her tongue out and whatever. And so we've just started spending time really getting her flat work down, and we're trying to show this because she's hard to place, but I think once she gets it, she's going to be phenomenal. But I think that's part of the thing too. You know, they need the time, they need the body work, they need to relearn how to use themselves. And until they do, that makes them harder to place. I mean, certain ones come off and they're perfectly, you know, supple and sound and willing, but we get so many that come in that are just, you know, totally upside down and inverted, or else they tuck their heads to their chest. And I think that makes it harder, but by showing that process, I think that helps as well.
Great. So we were intending to do breakout rooms with this meeting, which is why it's a meeting format and not a webinar. And I also understand, thank you, Kyle, for letting me know this. I think our automated email that's been going out every Tuesday, I think did not have very good deliverability today because Kyle mentioned he didn't receive it. So I think that may be why this session is a lot smaller. So I think rather than actually doing the breakout room, I think we're going to just stay in one room. But I do want feedback from attendees. If you guys have any difficult to place horses yourselves, I'm inviting you now to come turn your camera on, come off of mute, and let's kind of workshop some of these horses and see if we can come up with, you know, some marketing strategies or just sort of best practices, and pick the brain of our two experts, Bev and Jen, to help you guys place these horses. So if anybody brought a difficult to place horse with them, literally or otherwise, definitely pop off of mute. Hopefully I have this set that you should be able to do that. If not, drop it in the chat and I will attempt to turn that on the right way. And if nobody has one, then we'll just keep on cracking on.
I mean, I have plenty I can use as examples.
Hey, Kyle.
Kyle came prepared.
But I'll let everyone else kind of go first. But I've got, obviously, we have several that I could use as examples. So we could start with
Kyle. Go ahead.
Furthermore is one of those that's going to be an interesting. She has Furthermore is a retired broodmare. She's only 10. She's actually physically she's like a 16-3 mare. She's a really decent mover. She has a wing fracture and she had an ethmoid hematoma. So she's had a lot of her wing fracture is healing pretty well, but it's going to obviously cause a long-term, some issues with her. So she's going to be one of those that could be riding sound, but is going to need some maintenance and is going to probably need some ongoing, even attention to the nasal issue with the ethmoid hematoma. So just kind of one of those of knowing, right? She's one of those that we've considered euthanasia for, because it's like, should we, she came through a really great channel and someone that we don't want to, but when we think about placing her, it probably won't be now. We'll probably give her a few more months, but as we place her, knowing that history, disclosing that history, finding the right, person, what would you say is kind of a good approach on a mare like that we know we have x-rays and we know exactly what's going on? She's only 10, so she's got, life left, and she's a nice big mare. But I guess we can pose that one as a starter point.
I think that with your experience in the trail divisions that you did at the makeover, I would explore the in-hand stuff with her and see how brave she is, and if somebody could have a lot of fun with that kind of thing with her, then I would probably start investigating. Facebook has so many groups. Find groups of people that maybe I'm sure there's groups on Facebook where people do the in-hand trail stuff, but I would definitely play with that stuff when she's capable and see what her mind is like. And then if she's good with that, I would roll with that hard, because she's young enough that people could do that for years with her. And Liberty work, if she's real treat motivated, I'm sure that with all the stuff that you've done with your horses, that I'm sure you could train her to do that kind of thing. But I would find something that she excels in without being ridden, and I would push that to the day was long. And then I was saying earlier, I don't know if you're on before, but I'd had one that it had a hard time placing him, and I made sure that I had really, really good pictures that showed his personality, and that initial pictures that you put up, and videos, to make sure that they're really, really nice, because it's going to make people have that impulse to want that horse really bad. You've got a huge following too, so I'm sure it won't take you too long to find somebody for her. But I would definitely really highlight the things that she is good at once she's healed enough to do them. I mean, that's the way I would go with it. Those are tough. Because those are probably going to be something that she's going to need maintenance for the rest of her life. For sure.
Well, and I guess, Jen, the follow-up on that a little bit, and Bev, if you want to even jump on that too, is, we've had offers to take her and date an adopter who would be willing to manage the rehab and the recovery, right, and the time right from the beginning. But I'm a control freak, so for me, I want to make sure she's healed, and I'm managing that before she goes out, and I then know, was this systemic? Was it something that happened at where they were? How often would you place, maybe it's not that severe, we're not talking wing fracture, but it's something else that you just need some time, choosing to sell or adopt before they're fully rehabbed? Do you find success with that, or do you find that it's better to wait till they're fully we know they're going to break themselves again, but as fully along as you think they could be?
I think, Kyle, that the one thing you have to sort of assess who's offering to take the horse, but you also have to accept the fact that you aren't necessarily going to be the only home that can care for that mare the way she is. You might find another Kyle who's out there, who's got the resources and the ability and the knowledge that wants to take that on. I don't know who has been interested in taking her on. The other thing you could do is then have that person take her on, but work in conjunction with their vet. But I think, you sort of have to sometimes let go a little bit. And I learned this early on. I had a mare that, I was never going to ever sell. We were eventing, we were going prelim, moving up to intermediate, and she got hurt. And I kept her for a year, and I was never going to ever sell her. And she would never get sound again. And I found the best home from a woman who actually used her as a brood mare for sport horses. And she lived with that woman until she died. But that made me realize that I'm not necessarily the only one that can love this mare like I love this mare. So I think if you sort of keep that in mind, it's a little easier to let go. The other thing you can think about is an embryo transfer mare, if you can find a good program, or a nurse mare and have a contract where she has to come back to you. But that way, she might be useful that way as well. Of course, you've got to find a good program. There's some that are good and some that aren't. But that's another option for a mare. And I think the broodmare division at RRP has really made a big difference with helping find these horses homes as well.
We're hoping, if nothing else, that division is just at least increasing awareness as well as the overall marketability. Like, I don't think ever that will become like the end game for broodmares, because that's not the point of the makeover. It's supposed to just be a transition point, but we're hoping that puts the spotlight and increases like industry-wide awareness, that like broodmares can be a great option. Hopefully that's not coming like too little too late for this particular mare, to increase that. But it is hard too, because the goal of the makeover, of course, is to showcase trainability and athleticism, which is a little tough for a horse in this particular situation that may not be able to have a very fulfilled athletic career, but still has plenty to give in her own way. So
you also can't break yourself. You cannot break yourself financially. You like, to build on what Bev is saying, at some point, if the home seems good and you've done your homework and you've got your references and they're ready to take that on, you have to sometimes let go and let them try, because you've got a lot of horses to care for, and there's not always donations coming in. So, at some point you might have to take a breath, take a step back, see how it goes. And if it's not going well, then she comes back to you. I feel like when you have several horses needing your attention and your financial assistance, and you have one that has something so significant, and you have somebody that's willing to help you in that way, you might want to just take a step back and see if it works, even if it's like on a trial basis. I mean, it's hard to get donations. I understand that. And so at one point you might just have to take a step back,
Well, and I think too, when we started MidAtlantic, we'd go to New Holland and there'd be, 10 to 20 thoroughbreds every Monday. And we had to choose the big sound geldings or mares. We had to walk away from the ones with, broken knees or whatever. And it was hard because, everyone would say, well, why aren't you helping those horses? Well, we helped the ones that we could rehome so we could get in more. If we stuck with the old broken down ones, and we have plenty of those right now, but if, we started out with that, getting the truly unadoptable ones, we would have adopted out, we would have owned 20 horses, period, not 3,000. I think you really do have to look. I mean, donations are one thing, but time and money and space, they're all limiting factors. If we all had all the money we could have, we still would have trouble, I think, keeping up with it all.
Right.
I hope that helps. I feel
no, totally.
Ended on
a lot of those
note than we started, but
It's a lot
I think
to
you
think
still have
about,
plenty
for
of
sure.
options.
That's why I said she's definitely one of those difficult to because there's a lot of evaluation pieces that go into that horse specifically. She came in, presented sound, even the farrier and the vet have been impressed how she was walking on that foot. Like, it's just kind of one of those of she didn't show anything. So she wasn't donated to us in a way that it looked like she looked like she'd be going to the makeover this year. right? Well, that's obviously not a not going to be a path for her, but from a standpoint of, you get in and you adjust and you kind of make those decisions, but definitely makes it a lot harder to place than the big pretty mare who, oh wow, everybody wants this, right? Oh wow, who wants to manage the one that, until you use the word euthanasia, and then it's amazing how many people want a horse, right? I've noticed, Bevan, you guys, I'm glad you touched on it tonight, because it is one of those things of like, it's one of those, well, this is an option and it's such a, but well, yeah, it might be the most humane option too for this horse if she's going to be in pain or chronic, lameness for the rest of her life too.
Yeah, and that's where I think, like, how honest and forthright you have been, in chronic, because I've been also following this mare on your social media. I think that honesty and transparency is really key. Like I was saying earlier to Jen, like, one voice among many, sort of painting the realities of the situations that we're in, as an industry is useful. And I don't want to sound like we're exploiting this horse, in particular, but, I think being realistic about the journey, and that euthanasia may be an option, I think is key for people to learn and realize. So that doesn't necessarily help you place her, but I think that it's doing, the transparency in that journey is doing good for the industry, for people to learn and continue to be educated. So anybody else have one they would like to workshop as a group? All right. Cool. All right. Well, then let's see. We did touch on euthanasia. Does anyone else have questions in general? I know Kyle mentioned earlier, what resources do we share the most with buyers and adopters, to help educate on a limited horse or, old injuries. And we can definitely put together a list of articles that we have in the RRP Education Library. But Jen and Bev, do you guys have any particular sources that you refer to share with
RRP?
Thanks. We appreciate that.
I just try to tell people my experiences between racing and the show world, because I've seen a lot, I've rehabbed a lot. Usually when I have rehabs, or if I've gotten horses out of really bad situations, I don't do a whole lot of public posting on them, just because of the people that are behind the keyboard that want to tell you what they feel you should be doing when I already know what I should be doing. So they just see the ones that I'm buying to sell, and not so much the ones that I've actually paid for to get out of bad situations. So I try to just bank on my experiences and the experience of other horsemen that I respect. If people ask questions, and I have had people ask questions, come to me just for that. But I don't have all the answers. So a lot of times I will just refer to your guys' library because it's the best place that I know of that has the most information in one spot. So.
The other thing you can do is,
we created it. Go ahead, Bev.
the other thing you can do is have them talk to their vet or your vet or whoever. Of course, there are always vets that don't know racehorses. We're fortunate because we're in an area where we do have a lot of vets who do understand the racetrack, so they can speak with confidence that, this typically isn't a problem. We've had some vets that aren't involved with racing at all, and they've come and, oh, that horse has a bowed tendon. It's like, one vet insisted this horse had a bowed tendon behind. I said, really? Which leg? Oh, it's this one. And I'm sorry, but there was no bow. But of course, the person, this is years ago, she, ran away screaming. And that's not somebody that would do well with one of our off-track thoroughbreds anyway. So, we want to make sure that our adopters or whoever ends up with our horses has a good vet who understands the racing industry and these horses, and also has a trainer who can bring them along. If we have somebody come without their trainer, I'll ask them, well, do you have somebody who's going to support you in this journey? Because, if that's not the case, you either need a new trainer or you need to find a different horse. And I think that's happened with just a couple horses that we placed have not been with the right kind of trainer, or has been with a trainer who's upset that they didn't make the money on a commission, or the person found the horse on their own. And that makes it difficult. And sometimes the horses come back because of that. But, you've got to have a good support system. They can do the reading. They've got to be able to talk to people, talk to other riders, talk to trainers. We have one woman who adopted a horse from Puerto Rico from us who's got huge ankles, and she wasn't sure that a thoroughbred was ever going to be the horse for her. Her daughter has one of our horses and it's been great. Well, now she's just totally on the thoroughbred from Puerto Rico with big ankles bandwagon. It's just worked out so well, and she's so happy with the horse, and she's trying to get people interested in this horse we're trying to bring back as soon as he's healthy, because she's just, again, her experience has been so positive. When she came, she was very skeptical, and her friends were saying, "Oh, this is a great horse. You'll love him. You'll love him." And she said, "No, I'm not going to adopt him." And then she called me later that day and said she was, and just, he's worked out well. And so, the education factor is huge, and the experience factor.
Well, I have my own question. I know I'm moderating this panel, but I'm also a horse owner. So I have my own question for you two about vets and sort of that knowledge base, because I do ranch work with my horses, which on the East Coast is not a super common discipline. So it is difficult for vets who have the experience looking at thoroughbreds to know if, any of the injuries or conditions that they have may or may not be an issue in a Western discipline. And I know just from speaking with other friends who do, sports like barrel racing, which is a very different, activity for the horse's feet and legs than jumping, that sometimes it's very difficult for vets to assess how a racing injury may or may not affect a Western performance career. Do you guys have any experience with that? And I know, Jen, you've placed a lot of horses into Western homes.
Yeah. So we have a really good sport horse vet about an hour from us, and I always beg people to use him for pre-purchase because he does the sport horses and the thoroughbreds off the track, or does track work. So he knows how they can intertwine. And I picked his brain every time he's been out here, as far as, checking all of his field tests and stuff for everything. And he's always told me horses that have knees or a chip or a little bit of osteoarthritis, they make good dressage horses, they make good hunters, but I wouldn't take them cross country because of the terrain. So I kind of, with you working cows, I would probably steer away from a horse that's got bad knees, just because your terrain isn't level and consistent. And if you're cutting on a cow, I might be more concerned about a stifle or a hock, but hocks don't usually bother me that much,
Yeah.
So I wouldn't be worried about taking a horse out on cows that had an old osselet, but it also depends on what your footing is, your speed. I know that a lot of barrel horses, even quarter horses, get big knees. So that's not something that I would want to sell a horse for that had problems with knees. So yeah, I mean, it's case by case, obviously. It depends on exactly what you're doing. It depends on your footing, and it depends on the speed and the rider. So if I'm looking at a horse that, say, I bought and maybe it has some mild changes in its hocks, I would not feel that that would be a big deal for anything, really. But if it had old chips that maybe reattached or something, or there's some arthritis in a knee, that would probably make me say, okay, I don't want this horse doing speed events like Western, like barrel racing, or I don't know, any of the ranch work maybe. But it's hard to say in general, because every horse is so different.
Right.
Something that bothers one horse might not bother another horse ever. So
yeah,
but that's
it's been
like
hard
I say,
to
eventers
find
and dressage riders and hunters, it just depends on the horse, and it depends on the footing.
Yeah, it's hard to find vets that kind of understand the torquing that comes with, because it's so much of a rotational discipline, a lot of the Western disciplines versus, your hunters and dressage horses, they're bending, but they're not twisting in quite the same way. So it's interesting because I think.
Sorry, I was just going to say, to add to that, I would be looking for a smaller, more compact horse with a bigger hip. I wouldn't be looking for something that was 16.2 and leggy, because they're obviously probably not going to be as good at what you're asking them to do, but they might not even hold up as well because of what you're asking them to do.
Well, you saved those 15.2, 15.3 horses for me then, for that you have a hard time placing. Yeah, it's been difficult to navigate because, often when you find difficult to place horses listed, they're just listed as limited to non-jumping. But dressage and barrel racing are both non-jumping disciplines, but they're very different in the demands they're making
Yeah.
horses. So it's
Right.
hard to kind of blanket statement, you know, a non-jumping career. Well, why is it non-jumping? Is it non-jumping for impact, or is it non-jumping for, you know, like a stipend? Like there's so many different ranges, and it can be difficult to find a vet that understands the thoroughbred and, you know,
Yeah.
that particular discipline. So yeah, that's interesting.
Absolutely.
Well, thank you for humoring me. That was my
It's
personal
a
moderation.
hard question to answer because they're all so
is.
different, you know,
Right.
so many shapes and sizes and so many different things going on. I have to take it case by case,
Mhm.
you know, and if I have something that I think is going to do really well as a barrel horse or in the ranch work, then I'm probably going to go and peruse through all those in seek of ads and find somebody that's looking for that, because that's not my typical sale. You know, I do mostly eventers and dressage people. I've got some hunters and I have had some barrel racers, but not as many as in the other disciplines. So I'll spend time on all those groups and just start looking through to see who's looking for what. And if I think I have it, then I'll start messaging people. So.
Let's see. Kyle had a comment. Yeah, that's a great call about finding a vet who will tell you the why behind the limitations for their selecting. Yeah, and I think that's, you know, where like that's really key, to find the vet that's looking at it for a range of disciplines. And I think that's probably coming down to just choosing a good vet to, like, if I were shopping, I would choose a good vet who understands the needs of my discipline, you know, and can look at that. So
Kristen, do you think that your vet who understands the needs of your discipline is familiar with thoroughbreds? Is that a disconnect there?
well, that's what I think is a challenge, is finding a Western experienced vet on the East Coast who knows how to look at a thoroughbred and knows what particular brand of track injury may relate to
that
second, you know. And I realize that, like, we're a very small window of Western riders seeking thoroughbreds, you know, and there just isn't a huge market for that horse right now. So
they really
right
have
now
to
I've
have
been,
the mechanics
yeah,
of that discipline,
right,
you know.
well, and honestly, even just finding a vet period that understands the mechanics of this discipline on the East Coast is a challenge anyway, just because we're not Texas, you know, to quote Beyonce. You know, and it is a little bit of a challenge. So, you know, it is what it is. But right now I'm approaching it on the ride the horse, not the X-rays principle, which I know, you know, comes up a lot. You know, when you look at even like when I was interviewing riders for riding thoroughbreds at the 5-star level, most of those horses would not pass a PPE vetting, you know, and whether or not horses pass or fail vettings is a debate for another day too. But, you know, a lot of those horses are galloping those upper levels with all sorts of, you know, issues and maintenance needed. And that's just the reality of the sport. So, so yeah, I mean, you know, that's a little bit of preaching to the choir here, right? Like, we're all here to try to place those difficult to place horses, and, you know, we can debate that all evening. So do we have any other questions from attendees? And if you are watching this on recording, again, I apologize that the email did not seem to go out to the wide range of attendees. I know we've typically had like 20 to 40 participants, and it doesn't look like it's reached that today. So hopefully watching it on recording, you're at least getting the information. We apologize for that, and we'll figure out what happened for next time. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Thank you very much to our panel. Oh, one more question. Just in time, Wendy. At what point do you move on to another potential buyer after someone has asked and spent a lot of your time on a horse, especially a difficult one? So I think she's describing sort of the tire kicker scenario.
It depends on how much patience you have and how good how appropriate that home is. For me, I don't waste a whole lot of time, because if you have a horse that's gaining a lot of momentum that you've had trouble trying to place, and you suddenly stop with that momentum because you're spending a lot of time on somebody who's really tire kicking, then everybody else is going to lose interest and go somewhere else. And the same thing can be said for the nice horses that don't have anything wrong with them. You hold them off the market for somebody for a week or two and say they pass, somebody's going to think something else is wrong with them. So I try to give people the benefit of the doubt, but usually a day or two, and then I'll ask them blankly, you know, are you seriously interested? Because if not, I need to move on. I mean, I feel like honesty is the best thing here. You know, I'm trying to place this horse. I have limited resources. I have limited time. whether it's mine or a trainer that needs to move them quickly. People that waste too much of your time when they're not serious put the horse at risk. So I will point blank say, if you're not truly interested, I need to move on. And I try to make it friendly, but that's the reality of it.
We've had cases where somebody is waffling, and I'll just say, you know what, if you're not sure, keep looking. Look here, look somewhere else. You know,
Yeah.
I want you to sit on that horse and say, this is the one I want. And if you're not sure, it's not the right one, you know. And I mean, sometimes we have horses that we're dying to get placed and you're hoping it'll work out. But at the same time, you waste so much time. So we just, you know, I'll just say that. I'll just say, you know, if you're not sure, keep looking, you know. And so we've had people come to us, and I'm really not thrilled about adopting to them anyway. And I'll suggest going another route. And that's worked out. And I haven't said really why, but I'll just say, I don't think we have what you're looking for. And that could be somebody who is tire kicking, dragging their heels. Maybe they're not ready to buy a horse or adopt a horse. But, you know, again, you can spend too much time on people, and, you know, then people start to think, well, what's wrong with this horse that it hasn't gotten home yet? So
it takes getting some thick skin. I can't tell you how many people at the racetrack and then outside the racetrack say, I don't know how you do it. I couldn't deal with people. And really, it's just, I try to focus on the horse, you know, and if it's not the right place and if they keep dragging it out, I move on. I can't waste that time if I've got somebody else waiting in the wings that is a good home also, because I might miss out on that other good home. And now this other person has kicked tires and they disappear on you anyway. So I think that the nicest thing to do is just to say, you know what, I don't think this one's for you. If you're not serious, then you just need to keep looking.
yeah, we've had that same, you know, the horses we get directly from the trainers at the track, they'll say they don't want to deal with these people. You know, they don't want to, you know, they have all these questions and they, oh, can't we ride the horse? And, you know, jog, you know, at the racetrack, they're going to bring the horse out, jog it up and down if you're lucky, and say, do you want it? And, you know, most people don't don't react that quickly. So, you know, they'll come to us and just say, you know, I don't know how you deal with these people, because we can't, you know.
Well, and that's where, you know, the work that you ladies are doing in your respective organizations is so important to, like, be that bridge from the racing industry to the equestrian industry, because the needs, you know, and just straight function is so different, you know, as to how one industry works and how the other one works, you know, especially if you've got someone who's like looking for their forever horse, you know, and their next partner, like that process may take a little while. And I guess you don't really want them to rush that, but you also don't want them to waste your time. So if it, like you're both saying,
and I'll tell you
on.
too, there's Kristen, there's a whole group of resellers that are pretty big around the area that most people know who they are. And if I don't have what somebody's looking for and I'm not feeling like it's a good match, I'll send them to one of the other people. We do that all the time. We help each other out because, you know, it's hard. Sometimes it's really hard to place certain horses. And one of the resellers is the main girl that I send my horses to, that I have more trouble with, because she has that, she has those buyers that just want to trail ride, or she has the buyers that just need a horse to be their kid's buddy, you know, and she might put a few rides on him and she finds the right places for him. So I'm thankful to have people like that to turn to when I need to. But yeah, we definitely talk in between all of us and send buyers to each other when we don't have the right one for them. And we also talk amongst ourselves as to who to avoid when they do tire kick a lot. It helps narrow down the field a little bit.
For sure.
Well, great question, Wendy. Thank you for asking that. Last call for questions, and then we will call it an evening. Type now, forever hold your peace. Or also, since we're in a meeting, just pop off mute and ask a question too. There's no need for everybody to have to type it too. So All right. Well, that concludes Aftercare Industry Month. It has been, I think, a really, really cool month, to get so many different perspectives and cover so many different topics. So again, if you are watching this now, either live or you're watching your recording, you should have also received an email. If you're watching it live right now, this email should go out tomorrow or Thursday at the latest, with a survey to help us continue to make Aftercare Industry Month a useful service for everybody and a great source of information. So if you can take a few minutes and fill that survey out and let us know your thoughts. We would greatly appreciate that, and we will look forward to hopefully presenting this again next year. So Jen and Bev, thank you so much for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Everybody who is
Thank you.
attending live, and we'll see you again soon. Have a good
We
night.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Thanks.
Take care.
Everyone.